I'll be announcing the tariffs on Canada and Mexico for a number of reasons. Number one is the people that have poured into our country so horribly and so much. Number two are the drugs, fentanyl, and everything else that have come into the country. And number three are the massive subsidies that we're giving to Canada and to Mexico in the form of deficits. And I'll be putting the tariff of 25% on Canada and separately 25% on Mexico. And we will really have to do that because we have very big deficits with those countries. Those tariffs may or may not rise with time.
And will oil be part of that, though? Because we get oil from Canada.
Oil is going to have nothing to do with it as far as I'm concerned. Oil has nothing to do with it.
These tariffs will go into effect tomorrow.
Yep.
25% on Canada and Mexico, 10% on China. Are you expecting retaliation?
We'll see what happens, but I think, unfortunately, the retaliation has already happened. The problem with this whole idea that they're going to retaliate is they have already been taking advantage of America for decades. The retaliation is Donald Trump saying no more. We're not going to be taken advantage of anymore, and I think it's important the president is doing what he's doing. Now, look, it looks different ways and comes in different forms, whether you're talking about Canada or China or Mexico. We know that Mexico has allowed the facilitation of the illegal drug trade and illegal sex trafficking for years and has done nothing about it. If they want to be a better partner to us, the time starts now. We know the Chinese, of course, have stolen American manufacturing jobs for 30, 40 years, and also that they facilitated the trafficking of illegal fentanyl into Mexico, where the drug cartels then bring it into our country. We are sick of being taken advantage of. We still have, thank God, the biggest economy in the entire world, the best people and the best workers. But the message from President Trump to the entire world is very clear. We are done being taken advantage of, and we have a president who looks out for the interests of American citizens. Thank God we do, and we're going to try to do it the best we can.
All right, guys, so we got to talk about President Trump's tariffs, his trade war that, honestly, I'm not entirely convinced yet that he's actually going to go through with this, but it looks like he's going to, but also he might not, okay? We're going to talk about it because obviously the mainstream liberal media, the Democrats, they're freaking out about this, okay? And they're trying to frame this issue as an issue that is going to hurt Americans, and they don't actually really tell the whole story about tariffs, okay? Because who wins a trade war is basically going to be determined by who has the stronger economy that can actually withstand the effects of the tariffs, okay? And they fail to mention that, and that's probably one of the reasons why I got questions about whether or not this is actually going to go through, but who knows, right? I don't know at this point. I'm just saying I got questions, okay? As President Trump has announced that, hey, he is slapping tariffs on Canada and Mexico, mainly due to the smuggling of drugs across the border, Mexico not controlling the flow of illegal immigration, and also trade deficits, okay? He feels as if these countries are living off the United States of America. We are subsidizing them too much, and we're not getting enough in return, and he wants to correct that behavior. So he has essentially called for these tariffs to be placed on Mexico, Canada, and China on Tuesday, and that is causing all three of their currencies to fall, right? They're all crashing in relation to the dollar due to these tariffs. And I want to go and play a clip from the mainstream liberal media. Again, they're going to essentially tell the story from a one-sided perspective, but they're going to talk about the responses from Mexico and Canada and China because Canada and China, they are promising retaliatory tariffs. And President Trump says, well, if they retaliate, then he's going to retaliate with higher tariffs. Take a look.
President Trump has sparked a potential trade war between the U.S. and its two closest economic allies, Mexico and Canada, after announcing 25% tariffs on most goods from those two countries. The president also announced a 10% tariff on Chinese goods. As CBS's Christian Benavides reports, the move is likely to raise the price of some goods for Americans.
The tariffs levied against Mexico, Canada, and China are set to go into effect on Tuesday. They could lead to a rise in the price of cars, energy, spirits, lumber, and across the agriculture sector. President Donald Trump says they're necessary and in response to illegal immigration, illicit fentanyl, and trade deficits.
tariffs don't cause inflation, they cause success. Cause big success. So we're going to have great success. There could be some temporary short-term disruption, and people will understand that.
Mexico and Canada are set to face 25% tariffs, with the exception of Canadian energy at 10%. China will face 10% tariffs. The three are the U.S.'s biggest trading partners.
Tonight, I am announcing Canada will be responding to the U.S. trade action with 25% tariffs against $155 billion worth of American goods.
Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau has already retaliated and said the country was also considering non-tariff measures, including some related to critical minerals and energy. Mexican President Claudia Sheinbaum said retaliatory tariffs are also in the works. The Nonpartisan Tax Foundation says tariffs could cost the average American family about $800 a year. Christian Benavides, CBS News.
And China has vowed corresponding countermeasures to the tariffs without announcing specifics. They've also said they would file a case against the U.S. with the World Trade Organization. Economists say 25% tariffs against goods coming from Mexico and Canada could have a near immediate impact on the price Minnesotans and Wisconsinites pay for food and for gas. Currently, the two countries provide nearly 30% of all our imported goods. 60% of America's fresh fruit comes from out of the country, as well as 40% of our vegetables. Those prices could end up increasing nearly immediately, say local economists.
Yeah, so you see that, you heard that. Okay, so what you have here is Mexico saying that they are going to talk about potentially retaliating and what they're going to do. But however, they haven't really decided yet. You have Canada basically saying they're going to retaliate. And then you have China also saying they're retaliating as well, too. Now, some of the Canadian provinces are trying to target red states, okay, for revenge. Like, for example, British Columbia, they are banning the sale of alcohol from red states in response to the president's tariffs. And two more Canadian provinces are chucking all American alcohol from their stores, okay? So the Canadians are super, super pissed about this. They're banning alcohol from the United States of America, particularly red states. So they're trying to target red states. Now, this is the latest from President Trump in regards to this potential trade war. Take a look.
Are you planning to increase the tariffs against Canada?
Well, it could happen. If they do anything, we will. Canada's been very abusive of the United States for many years. They don't allow our banks. Did you know that? Canada does not allow banks to go in. If you think about it, that's pretty amazing. If we have a U.S. bank, they don't allow them to go in. Canada's been very tough on oil, on energy. They don't allow our farm products in, essentially. They don't allow a lot of things in, and we allow everything to come in. It's been a one-way street. We subsidize Canada by the tune of about $200 billion a year. And for what? What do we get out of it? We don't get anything out of it. I love the people of Canada. I disagree with the leadership of Canada, and something's going to happen there. But if they want to play the game, I don't mind. We can play the game all they want. Mexico, we've had very good talks with them, and this is retaliatory. This is retaliatory to a certain extent. Millions of people flowed into our country through Mexico and Canada, and we're not going to allow that. No, I'm not concerned. We may have short-term a little pain, and people understand that. But long-term, the United States has been ripped off by virtually every country in the world. We have deficits with almost every country. Not every country, but almost. And we're going to change it. It's been unfair. That's why we owe $36 trillion. We have deficits with everybody. We help everybody. We've been helping everybody for years. And to be honest, I don't think they appreciate it. So we're going to change that. We're going to change it fast. We're going to make America great again. We have to focus on our country. We have tremendous potential if properly used, and we have to focus on our country. Tremendous deficits with China, tremendous deficits with the European Union, tremendous deficits with Mexico and Canada. And why? What's the purpose of that? Why would we have deficits? And you look at if you look at pharmaceuticals and drugs, if you look at various products, it's much cheaper in other countries. We're not going to allow that much longer. We're not going to take it.
Yeah, so you seen that, you heard that. Now, I got to be honest with you guys. I have a lot of mixed feelings about these tariffs, okay? And one of the reasons why is because I'm not a fan of tariffs solely as an economic policy. Outside of using it to protect certain industries in the United States of America that we definitely should protect, right? We should not be outsourcing to other countries completely, okay? Which I think is the main use of Trump's tariffs during his first administration, right? I'm totally fine with that. I'm totally okay with that. However, I am a fan of tariffs as a means of achieving some type of diplomatic goal or agenda in order to get better trade deals, in order to use it to make other countries do the things that we want them to do, okay? I'm totally okay with that, and I'm definitely a fan of using the threat of tariffs for that. But in regards to the actual economics of tariffs, not a big fan, okay? And one of the reasons why I'm not a big fan is because tariffs, while they're not inflationary, that is what the mainstream liberal media is misleading people on, because inflation is caused by the federal government printing more money, and increase in the money supply is what leads to inflation, which would be prices increasing across the board, right? Tariffs lead to price increases for the goods and services that are affected by the tariffs. Inflation is not that, okay? That is simply what you would call a tax, okay? But it's not inflation, okay? If a tax was inflation, then every tax increase that Democrats propose to tax the rich would be inflationary. They would say that this causes inflation, but they don't say that. Again, there's a difference between inflation caused by increase in the money supply and prices rising as a result versus a tax in which you have some prices of some goods and services affected by the tax rising as a result. Those are two different things. In fact, excessive taxation can lead to deflation due to the fact that because of the tax, consumer spending will decrease, which means that you will have less demands for certain goods and services, which would lead to deflation, right? A decrease in prices. Okay. So again, that is the big difference I want people to understand. Now, what the mainstream liberal media is refusing to acknowledge is that Canada and Mexico would be hurt a lot more than we would from this trade war, which is why I really don't think that this is going to happen. But if it does happen, it ain't going to be that long, right? Or at least I'm hoping it's not going to be that long. But one of the reasons why I say this is because if you look at Canada's economy and how much they depend on U.S. trade, the total Canadian GDP for 2023 is around 2.2 trillion. Total Canada-U.S. trade is about 850 billion, which means that 38% of Canada's GDP comes from trade with the United States of America. Basically, 40% of their economy is dependent on trading with us, right? That's how much Canada is dependent on the United States of America, okay? So their exports to the United States is 460 billion, which is 75% of their total exports. So you can imagine that if 75% of their exports are being tariffed, how much of an effect that would have on the economy, because that would increase the price of Canadian goods in the United States of America, which would lead to less consumers, less Americans buying the Canadian goods, which would mean the Canadian companies would make less money selling in America. And because they're so dependent on selling in America, that would lead to a recession, probably a depression for the Canadian economy, because their big companies won't make as much money and they'll have to lay off people, and all types of other economic effects will happen as a result. Again, that is what the mainstream liberal media, they refuse to tell you, okay? Now, compare that to the United States of America. When you talk about exports to Canada, that's worth around $400 billion. Now, our imports from Canada are around $450 billion. Now, total U.S. trade, again, as I pointed out, $850 billion, but our GDP is $27 trillion. So U.S. trade with Canada only accounts for about 3% of total U.S. GDP, right? So, here's the thing. In the grand scheme of things, 3% in relation to Canada's 38% is small, but in relation to, GDP in general, 3% is kind of a big deal, right? However, the point is that it's going to hurt Canada a lot more, okay? And that's why I don't think this is going to happen. Same thing with Mexico, right? The numbers with Mexico, again, it doesn't even compare, right? The Canadians and the Mexicans depend a lot more on the U.S. When it comes to trade than the other way around. And while it can hurt us, it's going to hurt them a hell of a lot more, which again is why I think that something will get worked out, right? In fact, President Trump says that tariff talks are set for Monday with Canada and Mexico. So essentially, he's going to be holding talks with their leaders tomorrow, and he's also threatening tariffs with the European Union, right? So if I had to guess, right, I would say that these talks are going to be Mexico and Canada coming to the table to do whatever the president wants them to do. Now, he says that it's about fentanyl and it's about illegal immigrants and it's about the trade deficit, the trade imbalance. So again, I'm hoping that they work something out. Seriously, right? I really am. Because, hey, you know, I understand where Trump is coming from when it comes to this idea that, well, before we had the modern version of the federal income tax, this country was primarily financed by tariffs. And at that point in time, we were the richest, okay? We're talking about the late 1800s, early 1900s. Yeah, we were very rich, okay? And I get it. President Trump is in his Teddy Roosevelt bag, so maybe that's who he's trying to embody here in regards to his foreign policy and how he's, you know, carrying that big stick. But the difference is that back then our government was much smaller, so it was easier to have tariffs finance the government, but our government today is extremely big, and if we were to have tariffs finance the government and not federal income taxes, which, hey, I would totally be fine with, okay? I would totally be fine with having tariffs and no income tax, right? In fact, if that's the direction he wants to go in, great. But we would have to significantly reduce the size of the government in order to achieve that, okay? The size of the government in relation to GDP today is much larger than it was back then. And that's why the tariffs worked back then, is because the government was small enough for that to work. Now, it's funny because the reason why the federal income tax was implemented was this idea that, hey, well, you know, we don't have to deal with the tariffs anymore, right? And only the rich would pay taxes. Now, that obviously didn't work out when it comes to the original promise of the federal income tax. This is why you should always be skeptical of these leftists, these progressives out here promising that, hey, if we tax the rich, it's not going to affect you. It always starts with, it's just going to affect the rich. It's not going to affect anybody else. And that's how they swindle you. So with that being said, yeah, this is what's happening right now. Okay. A lot of things are very, very, very volatile right now in the markets. A lot of things are getting crushed over these tariffs. I am hoping that this is temporary because the financial markets are not good right now, right? They're not signaling good things right now about this potential trade war. So with that being said, President Trump clearly has goals when it comes to what he's trying to do, okay, and the agenda that he's trying to push forward with. And he's been in talks with Panama about the Chinese control over the canal and trying to work out a better deal with Panama, or else we'll have to take it over, right? That's essentially the value proposition that he has put forth with Panama, and he had Marco Rubio go over to Panama to have discussions about the Panama Canal. And lo and behold, Panama has now agreed that they're going to rip up their agreement, or they're going to try to get out of their agreement with China in order to foster better relations with the United States of America after this visit from Marco Rubio. Take a look.
They violated the agreement. They're not allowed to violate the agreement. China's running the Panama Canal. That was not given to China. That was given to Panama foolishly. But they violated the agreement, and we're going to take it back, or something very powerful is going to happen.
Una cosa importante, que es una decisión que adopté y se la comuniqué. El memorándum de entendimiento del año 2017 sobre la ruta de la seda de Belt and Road Initiative no será renovado por mi gobierno. Eso es así. Vamos a estudiar la posibilidad de si se puede terminar antes o no, pero creo que le toca en 1 o 2 años la renovación, porque es cada 3. Así que esa iniciativa que se firmó, cuando se firmó, en el tiempo que se firmó, no será renovada por mi gobierno. Creo que esta visita abre un camino para construir una nueva etapa de relaciones. Así lo veo yo, así lo sentí de parte del secretario Marco Rubio, y a la vez tratar la medida de lo posible de que se incrementen las inversiones de los Estados Unidos en Panamá. Le expliqué una serie de proyectos de infraestructura que el gobierno tiene en carpeta, en cartera, con el ánimo de que las conozcan y en su momento que se hagan las licitaciones, que comenzarán muy pronto, pues se pueda entrar.
Yeah, so you seen that, you heard that. Now I'm starting to understand why President Trump selected Marco Rubio to be his Secretary of State. Okay, he went over there and they started speaking Spanish, right? They start having real talk, okay? Real talk about what's gonna happen here. Okay, you're gonna rip up this deal, or basically we're gonna invade, right? We're gonna take it back. We're gonna take the canal back by force, which we should have never gave away. Okay. Again, I just think that President Trump really is in his Teddy Roosevelt bag. I wish that he would be more forceful with Greenland, right? Trying to acquire Greenland from Denmark than these tariffs with Canada and Mexico. But I understand where he's coming from, right? I get it. I understand it. I'm just hoping that, again, this is a part of an initiative to get a better trade deal, to get better terms, to secure the border, and not for Canada to become a 51st state, right? If you want another state or territory, I'd much rather go out to Greenland than Canada, okay? With Greenland, you get the resources, you get the strategic military location, we can control the trade routes of the Arctic, and we get a lot less liberals, right? We still get a lot of liberals, right? But less of them, far less than Canada, okay? With Canada, if we take them in as a 51st state, unless you divide up their provinces, we're basically taking in a whole lot of leftists and liberals, and I'm not sure if this country can take a lot more of those, right? I'm just saying. So, yeah, what you have here is the Panama president coming out and basically saying that he is going to essentially try to get out of this deal with China and to capitulate to some of President Trump's demands. Let's read here. Panama's president reiterated on Sunday that Panama's sovereignty over the Panama Canal is not up for debate, saying that during talks with U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio that he had addressed the United States' concerns over China's presence around the vital waterway. President Raúl Mulino added, however, that Panama would not renew a 2017 memorandum of understanding to join China's overseas development initiative known as the Belt and Road, and suggested that the deal with China could end early. Panama will seek to work with the U.S. on new investments, including infrastructure projects. He said, quote, I think this visit opens the door to build new relations and try to increase as much as possible U.S. investments in Panama, Mulino told reporters on Sunday after Rubio's first foreign trip as the United States' top diplomat. Yeah, so again, this is what's happening, right? This is what's happening right now. You also had President Trump send over one of his administration members to negotiate with Venezuela. And we ended up getting some hostages back. And apparently they have agreed to take back their illegal immigrants, including their dangerous criminals. Okay, we'll see how that works out. But I think that President Trump is, again, he's really reaching into the Monroe Doctrine here to exert influence over our neighbors, particularly Latin America. Okay, and to prevent China from having more influence in this side of the world, in our own backyard. And I think that's kind of what's going on here, right? I mean, I think that President Trump really, he probably read a history book of the United States from, I don't know, the 1870s to the 1920s, was like, yeah, right, this is what we're going to try to do, right? That's kind of what it seems like. It seems like that's what's going on here, but I don't know. All I know is that there's a lot of uncertainty right now, and for that reason, I hope that some deal gets worked out here soon. But let me know what you guys think. Make sure you like, comment, and subscribe. Most importantly, share a Black conservative perspective. Peace.